Putin understands very clearly something that Solzhenitsyn said repeatedly, and Solzhenitsyn ultimately met with Putin on numerous occasions before he died. Solzhenitsyn always argued Russians need to be out of the business of ruling people who are not Russians. Unless, of course, those people opt to be part of Russia. And there are 20 million Muslims. Many of those Muslims initially didn't want to be in Russia. Now they do, and they're very happy. But the majority of the people in Russia are Russians. And that was the whole goal when Russia was essentially liberated from the burden of trying to manage everybody else in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. They got to focus for the first time in centuries on Russia. That's where Putin's focus is. He's a nationalist. He's worried about Russia. He doesn't want to rule anybody else who isn't Russian. But again, if we try to put missiles that can strike the Russian interior into Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia, yes, he's going to intervene to stop it. And in Finland, what were we prepared to do in Cuba? It's no different.
I want to look now at this idea, which is voiced by so many on the warmongering right. Oh, well, it's not even right. It's the uniparty, the warmongering uniparty, that anything besides, yes, let's go kill everybody and send missiles and weapons everywhere, is isolationism.
There's an increasing move towards isolationism in the U.S. Does this concern you?
Of course it does. We are a global power, and we're going to need to continue to do what's necessary to protect those interests.
He's claiming there that anything that we're doing is to protect our interest. How do you see it?
Well, he also said something else we can't lose sight of. He said, we are a global power. This is a very important statement. Much of what we do in Washington is mortgaged to two things: vanity and self-delusion. Both vanity and self-delusion demand that we portray ourselves to the world and to our own population as this unchallenged global power. And the implication is American military hegemony is not only something that we want, it's something that everybody else favors and appreciates. Well, that's not true. And it hasn't been true for a long time. First of all, it's unaffordable. I mean, your $34 trillion debt that's piled up, national sovereign debt, didn't pile up by accident. And the solution right now in both parties, the answer is, we'll just keep printing money. But if you look at BRICS, if you look at the emergence of new institutions that are going to compete with things like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in the future, it's pretty obvious that this is not going to go on in perpetuity. We are on the threshold of a very serious financial crisis. We don't need to keep pretending it's otherwise. You've got Nassim Taleb telling everybody Armageddon is just over the hill, and he's right. But we're going to pretend otherwise until the bitter moment arrives. And of course, that was true with Great Britain before and during the outbreak of World War II, for which they were completely unprepared and incapable of fighting. The only thing that saved them was the English Channel. And then ultimately we came in, and the rest is history. But they bankrupted themselves, destroyed themselves, and became a third-rate power. We don't want to do that, which is one of the reasons that we argue against it. That's not isolationism. That's prudence. The second thing is there's no appreciation for the extent to which the world has changed. You listen to these people, you think this is 1991. It isn't. 2024 is a new world, a fundamentally different world. And that needs to be understood. Iran has come roaring back, not because they picked up a couple of $1 billion that was theirs anyway. It's been happening for some time. The same thing is true in Turkey. Do they have problems? Do they have difficulties? Of course, but these are great powers. China was the richest power in the world for most of the last 2,500 years. But they spent about 340 of the last 500 years under foreign domination. And little Israel is entirely a dependent state, a dependency of the United States. And we've been doing this for a long time, which has absolved them of the responsibility to get along with their neighbors, to behave, frankly, like a normal state. We've underwritten their military power and capability and backed them up to the point where they've now driven us into a corner, all of us, not just the people in the Middle East, but us as well, putting us in a position where, if we don't support Israel, given the terrible things the Israelis have done in the last few months, Israel might not survive at all. The point is that this question of isolationism has nothing to do with walking away from the rest of the world. We don't need to do that. We've never done that. We don't have to do that. But we do have oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, that have protected us. And we can limit our interests. We don't have to be everywhere all the time. In fact, trying to be everywhere has bankrupted us. We can't afford 800 and plus bases all over the world. That should be cut in half or less. And it can be done, but it's not going to happen until we have financial disaster on the doorstep.